Morning all and welcome back. This video is all about my preferred type of outdoor shelter, the good old versatile tarp. I'm going to break this video up into two halves. The first half is just going to be taking a look at the tarps that I use. There are several of them and I use them for different situations, different occasions, and then the second half of the video I'm going to show you some different ways to set up your tarp, some different sort of tarp tent shelter configurations. I've got 6 tarps here to show you, starting with the biggest, bulkiest, heaviest one over here, right down to the smallest, most compact, lightest one on this side here. And what I'm going to do is just go through them all in turn. I'll set them up and I'll compare them and go through what I like about them. First up, we've got this beast here. This is a 4 meter by 3 meter canvas tarp from Outhaus. This thing is really durable. Being canvas, it's heavyweight. And it will stand up to any amount of abuse you throw at it, really. It's great for bushcrafting, it's great for canoe camping, it's great for car camping. It's got a bit of weight to it. It weighs 5.6 kilograms, so it's not, it's not a lightweight option, but it's the sort of thing you can pass on to your kids and it will probably last them a lifetime as well. It's really resistant against getting snagged on, sharp sticks, brambles, thorns and things. It's resistant against sparks from your fire. It doesn't tear as easily as nylon. It's just great. So if you're looking for a heavyweight vintage style tarp that will last a lifetime, this might be a good option. So as you can see, it's massive. There are loads of different ways that you can set it up. I've just set it up as a lean-to, as you can see. I've got lines on all 4 corners and then on the intermediate tie-outs on the 2 long sides. So on the 4 meter sides, just means I can set it up like this. But it works really well with a ridge line as well. So you can just, there's just so many different possibilities. There are loads of tie-outs. There are 5 along each edge, and then there are 5 down the middle in both directions. The other bonus about being canvas is it blocks out the light, which is really handy. If you want to lie in the morning, you want to block that sun out, or you just want to use it for shade, it's ideal. For car camping, it's great. I can tie this off to the side of the Land Rover and create a big shady shelter off the side of the Land Rover, and I can sleep underneath that in a bivvy bag or in my swag or something like that, and it's a really good setup. Yeah, I really like it. Next up is the good old British Army shelter sheet, or Basha. These things are brilliant. They're heavyweight, they're pretty no frills. They measure about 2.5 meters by 2 meters, loads of tie-out points on them, and they are cheap. You can pick these up for 20 to 30 pounds, so they're not going to break the bank, and they make a really good shelter. So as you can see, it's plenty big enough as a shelter for one, plus your kit. You can set it lower than this if you want, with a steeper pitch, and that will shed rain off better, and it will stop that driving rain from getting in underneath. I've just set it up like this so that you can see it for size, really. There are loads of tie-out tabs, 3 along each side, 1 in the middle as well, so you can use it with a ridge line, and there are brass grommets as well, so you can use it with poles. Pretty versatile, all sorts of different ways that you can set it up. The camo print that this one has is the old style DPM. I think this is the jungle one. They do a desert one, and then they do the modern, is it MPT camo? I can't remember what it's called. They do that print as well on it. But I know camo isn't everybody's bag. It's not really mine, but it's quite useful for stealth camps. That does just merge away into the foliage, and you can stay quite nicely hidden. Yeah, they're really good. They're a bit on the heavy side, but they are really cheap. The next tarp I've got here is the good old DD 3x3. This is the original version, the heavier version. I have the Superlight as well, which I'll show you in a minute. 3x3, so it's a square, really versatile for setting it up in different configurations. Being a square, you can have it on the square, you can have it on the diamond, you can make a tarp shelter tent, you can do all sorts of things with it. I set it up in this diamond configuration just to show you one of the possibilities of using a square-shaped tarp. It gives you a little bit more length protection, which is great if you're hammocking. You know, it protects your hammock suspension a bit better, stops that water from running down your suspension and into your hammock, making you wet. You obviously don't have quite as much protection from the sides because it's a triangle rather than a rectangle, as it would be with a sort of conventional setup. But sometimes the diamond is, well, it's just the perfect setup for the conditions that you might find yourself in. It weighs in at just under 800 grams and it has multiple reinforced tie-out loops along the edges, 5 along each edge and along the ridge as well. Next up, I've got the DD Superlight Tarp. This is 3 meters by 2.9 and it's a lighter weight version of the 3x3 that I just showed you. It's got the same number of tie-out points, but they're slimmed down and the webbing is smaller, just to shave weight. They've managed to get this tarp down to under half a kilogram, 470 grams I think it is, and with my paracord, which I have permanently attached to it, and the ridgeline which lives in the bag with it, it weighs about 700 grams including the bag, which I don't think is too bad. I'm quite happy with that. I use this tarp probably the most out of all of my tarps. It goes with me on most of my trips and I really like it. Next up is my Warbonnet Superfly tarp. This is really designed as a hammock camping tarp, but it works really well as a ground tarp as well if you're sleeping on the ground. It weighs just a little bit more than the Superlight from DD, but it's a bigger tarp and it's got some additional features. I've actually managed to keep the weight of this down with all of the lines and things that I use, all my guy lines and ridge line and everything, because I'm using microcord, which is a 3-strand paracord. That weighs in at 650 grams, including all of the lines. So that's the ridge line, the guy lines, the carabiners, the bag, everything, as opposed to 500 grams, which is just for the tarp alone. That's the tarp pretty much set up, but you'll notice that there are these weird flappy bits on the end. And this is one of the features of this tarp that I really love. The wings on either end of the tarp are designed so that you can close off both ends. They act like doors and you can keep that wind and that weather off you while you're inside. You can lower this whole tarp down and have that on the ground, so it's like a tent basically, or you can just hang your hammock up inside and it just keeps it much warmer during the winter. I've added some shock cord and some little clips so that I can clip it to the tie-out corners and close those doors off easily, and being shock cord, nothing's going to get damaged if the wind picks up. And the other feature I really like about these tarps is that you can use a spreader bar to lift the tarp fabric up. There are attachment points on both sides of the tarp and you can buy these spreader bars that are designed to work with them, and it just lifts that fabric up, gives you loads more space inside. Really cool feature. And then lastly, I've got my little nano weight competition tarp here from Terra. This is the competition one, the smallest one they do. There are two, measures 2.4 by 1.4, so it is small, but it's big enough. If you're using it with a bivvy bag or something like that, it's absolutely fine. I tend to use this for backpacking trips when weight and space is an issue. It only weighs 195 grams on its own. With the lines that I keep attached to it and some loops that I have on it, it bumps it up to about 270, but still, you know, it's nothing. The bag is a lot bigger than the tarp. It actually compresses down way smaller than that. It is absolutely tiny. Made from sil nylon, just like the Warbonnet tarp. Yeah, really good. I've set it up as a lean-to using my walking poles, because that's typically how I would set it up if I was out backpacking. I'd have the poles with me anyway, so I don't have to take them, you know, additional poles with me. I'm just using something I've already got, so that works well. It's a basic tarp. It's just got 3 tie-out points along each edge with additional little grommets, so you could put poles through if you wanted to. And yeah, it's simple, but it does the job. It's very light, it's super waterproof, and it takes up no space at all in your pack. So those are the tarps that I use. I have no affiliation with any of these brands. These are all tarps that I've bought with my own money, and I bought them because they have features I like, or I just really like the tarps. They range dramatically in price, you know, from the cheap army surplus Basha shelter sheet, the camouflage one, right the way up to the Warbonnet Superfly, which is eye-wateringly expensive. I bought that from the US, and with the import tax slapped on top of it, it was, yeah, it was a moment of madness, let's put it that way. But I do love the tarp. It's got features that I haven't really seen on other tarps, and it is a corker, that's for sure. Yeah, so those are the tarps I use. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to show you some of the ways that I like to set them up. I'm going to base them all on the 3x3 tarp because it's the most versatile. You know, you've just got way more options for setting things up. So I'll use one of the DD tarps, and we'll take a look at some different shelters. This configuration is just about the easiest way to set up your tarp. You can do it in several ways. If you run a ridge line between 2 trees, you can just drape the tarp over that ridge line and peg it out. You can attach guy lines to the middle guying out points and just pull those tight to a tree, or you can run your ridge line and then suspend your tarp from that ridge line, and that's what I like to do. I use prusik loops, and I just attach my tarp that way. I can slide it along, and it puts less stress on the fabric, and you're less likely to damage your tarp in windy conditions. At the end of the day, when you're tired, you know, you don't have to think too much about setting your tarp up this way. You can literally just take it out of the bag, and mine is rigged up and ready to go for this configuration. It gives you lots of cover from the wind and from the rain, and you can tweak it to give yourself even more protection. By moving your guy lines from the corner of the tarp to the next loop along, you create these triangles, which you can bring together and fasten to create a panel here, or a door. That cuts out lots more wind. Really good in the winter for hammock camping. Obviously there is still a gap there, so that you're going to get some wind coming through, but you can reduce that by guying this out, and you'll be able to pull that even closer together, you know, with bungee cord or with guy lines. That would work probably a bit better. For hammock camping, this is ideal because your hammock is higher up here, where the tarp is still longer. By the time you get down to the ground, it's not really long enough to sleep under in this setup, in this configuration. So if you're ground camping, sleeping on the ground, this isn't really going to work for you, not unless you're really short. But yeah, what you're basically creating is a shorter and much cheaper version of the Warbonnet Superfly. The next setup I want to show you is the Adirondack tarp shelter. It's an excellent option if you're sleeping on the ground. Offers you lots of protection. There are wings which come around and close off the sides, as well as protection from the back, and it's got a small kind of porch type area at the front, so if you're having a fire in front of it to keep you warm, that keeps a bit of the weather off your fire as well. It's a really good shelter with lots of protection from the wind. Another setup that gives you loads of protection from the wind and from the weather is the plough point. It's much simpler than the Adirondack, but it does have a bigger sort of footprint, and it's taller. So if you know, space where you're setting up is an issue, this might not be suitable. But it is a really good shelter, and like I said, dead simple. There is loads of room in here. You could easily fit 3 or 4 of you in here. And there's room at the front here where this bit overhangs because it goes up to a point. There's room here to cook under cover as well. Loads of protection from the wind, from the back and from the sides. A really good shelter. It is just big, you know, it has a big footprint, so you know, it might not fit where you want it to go. I've got it set quite low at the moment. You can have it steeper, but if you're tying it to a tree like I did, obviously the steeper you have it, the higher you've got to go up that tree to tie it off. You can use an A-frame, which does make it easier. If it's not a tree in the right place, you can just lash 2 poles together, and then you can raise that A-frame up and get it into the position you want it to be in, and then just guy it down to the ground. That'll work really well. I've done that before. If you're after even more protection from the elements, or if you're in an area where you can't hang your tarp up conventionally because there are no trees or whatever, then a tarp tent configuration might be an option. It's a clever way, using a bit of folding, a bit of sort of clever origami, of turning your tarp into a tent, which is almost completely enclosed with the exception of a small door area at the front. And you can use a trekking pole or canoe paddles as the pole to hold it up. It offers a lot of protection, and there's room in there for certainly for 1 in gear, perhaps, you know, 2 close friends. There's not a huge amount of room in there, although room is improved if you create a kind of A-frame pole. I've got a video on how to do that with canoe paddles. If you scroll right down through my videos, right down, it's an old video, but there is a video in there showing you how to do that. There's actually loads of room in here. I'd forgotten how big this tarp tent shelter is. You could easily sleep 2 people in here with kit. Yeah, it's a good setup. I've used this a few times, but slightly shortened and sleeping acrossways at the back. But actually, I've set it up today, and it's all up and lifted up nicely, and there's lots of space. The only issue is the pole here, really. But like I said, you can substitute that with an A-frame, or by using 2 canoe paddles and a peg bag. Put the handles of the canoe paddles into the peg bag and then separate them, and it'll just sit up there and they'll be right out the way, and you won't need to get around it to get out the door. So you have that opening at the front there, but it's not a big opening. You know, if you position this back into the wind, you know, it's not a problem at all. And you've still got a nice view, which is good. Let's see what's going on. There's one other tarp setup that I use often, and that's the canoe tarp shelter. It's basically a lean-to where I use my canoe as the back wall of the shelter. You know, it's a solid object, it's smooth, the wind can blow around it, and it offers really good protection. The tarp then wraps over the top, and I can support the tarp on my canoe paddles and keep it up as a sort of canopy. It gives me lots of protection from the weather, from the wind, and from the sun. If the weather changes and there's a chance of heavy rain or driving rain, I can just drop those canoe paddles down and drop the whole panel down, and it almost gives me complete protection. I'll usually have a bivy bag with me anyway, which is waterproof, but you know, the tarp just gives me that extra bit of protection and keeps all my gear dry and all the rest of it. So those are some of the ways that I like to set my tarp up. They're not my ideas. Some of them have been around for, well, centuries. You know, people have been sleeping under tarps for a long time, and all of these different configurations have been around for a long time. These are just ones that I like to use. I much prefer to sleep under a tarp when I'm out in the woods, when I'm outdoors. I feel much more like I'm in the place where I am. You know, better visibility, better airflow, just open and more free better than being zipped into a nylon tent in my mind. Although there are times when obviously a tent is a much better option. When the weather is very bad, or you're up in the mountains and there's high wind speeds, you know, a tent is a better option. Also, when there's biting insects, you know, it gives you a place where you can escape, a bit of sanctuary and refuge away from the biters. You can do that in a bivvy bag, but they're tiny. You haven't got room to sit up, you haven't got room to eat or to do anything really. So a tent is better in that sort of situation for sure. But as a rule, I much prefer a tarp. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you soon.